For our last presentation of this morning, we're incredibly fortunate to have Eunice Trotter, the director of the Black Heritage Preservation Program for Indiana Landmarks, and her presentation is a brief overview of Indiana Landmark Black Heritage Program initiatives. Please offer our warm welcome to Eunice. Thank you, Eunice.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay, I'm not a tech girl, but so I'm going to make sure I can make this happen here. Thank you for being here today to learn a little bit about the very important work that I'm doing. I got in on the tail end of the last presenter, and I was saying to one of my mentees that very community that was being discussed has a Black settlement history that is little known, and we're trying to document it now. We had a community gathering there last summer to begin the process of getting oral histories. So it's an example of what we're finding all over the state. We're finding these hidden enclaves of African American culture and history and heritage and presence that we knew nothing about today. So with that, I'm going to get rolling here. I like to always start out with a little bit of history about where Black folks came from here in Indiana. African Americans have history dating back to the early 1700s, and some would contend late 1600s here in Indiana. Most of that population in the earliest part of that history was centered in the Knox County area, which of course was the center of the population for most Americans as expansion headed west from the colonies after the Revolutionary War. And that was no exception for African Americans. They were there when Americans arrived, with the French, with the Native Americans. We have been able to document just substantial history of births and deaths and just presence, period, particularly in that southwest part of the state, which was part of the old Northwest Territory. One of our projects that the Indiana Landmarks Black Heritage Preservation Program completed a couple years ago was documenting the sites of these Black settlements. And we have been able to document 90 of these settlements approximately statewide. Now, what is a settlement? We define a settlement as an area where there is institutional evidence. For example, a cemetery, a foundation, some artifacts, anything that would indicate population and presence. And you'll see here, they're scattered all over the state, pre-Civil War. Indiana Landmarks started doing a lot of this work with Black heritage back in the 1990s. And it was a volunteer effort, no funding, a volunteer crew that was doing surveying work and some documentation of oral histories, that kind of thing. And it continued on that path until 2022, when Eli Lilly, well, the Lilly Endowment actually, and some other entities funded this effort. That was with a $5 million gift, $4 million of which is in an endowment, and then $1 million for grants over 5 years at $200,000 a year. So our mission is to uncover, document, preserve, and restore / celebrate Black heritage statewide. These grants are up to 30 grand, although we haven't given very many of those at that level, because if we do, then we'll have shot, a substantial part of our budget for the year. But normally in the $15,000, $20,000 range at $200,000 per year. We have additional support for doing this work through a fund called the Stan Cox Fund, which was created by a former Eli Lilly and Company employee, Stan Cox, who wanted to make sure that he left a legacy in preserving Black heritage sites. So far, in the 3 years of operation of this program, we've given away over $500,000 in grants, 60 awardees, 10 registered nominations in the pipeline, although I'm worried about a lot of them now. 8 historical marker nominations completed, and we're working on about 20 capital projects. So one of our major goals and emphasis is to build capacity for doing this work. While the Black Heritage Preservation Program is a part of landmarks, pretty much I'm operating as a one-man band with help from our interns who I work to death, and also some other staff that gives some ancillary support. But we are building capacity, and we're doing that through our intern program. You'll notice here all 3 of the 4, too, by the way, of our first interns are Ball State grads, students, 2 of whom are here today in the audience with us. That was our 2023 class. And then last year's class, we also provide scholarships. The first year we did a $20,000, the second year we did 2 10s. And because of the demand, we did 4 $5,000 scholarships this year that we're going to be giving away. This is in an effort to build the capacity for doing this work and for the representation of African Americans in this preservation field. Another way that we're building capacity is through a statewide network of grassroots organizations doing the work. We are pairing small community-based groups with existing preservation groups to learn how to do the work. We're operating from the principle of teach a man to fish, and he will never be hungry. And so we are teaching these groups how to do the preservation work. How do you get something on the register? How do you apply for a historic marker? How do you do a restoration project? What's the first, second, third steps that you take? How do you do an oral history harvest? So these groups, as you see here on the screen, are from all over the state, and they are operating at varying levels of efficiency and performance, but we are going to be working on them to continue to shore those groups up. Here's an example of one of the groups. They're diverse groups. Initially, I had thought, okay, let's make them Black-led, because there's often challenges in how history is framed. It depends on who's telling the story. But what I have found is that it doesn't matter, just so the truth is told. And so we have some great groups functioning. For example, this one in Knox County, they're doing a digitization project that you've not heard about yet, but they have been making some astounding discoveries of Black heritage documents in Knox County, in boxes and in basements and in attics. And they're digitizing all of this, and it will soon become public facing. My understanding is now they're loading it onto the Indiana Memory website. So if you get a minute, take a look at some of those documents that they're finding there. This is our group in New Albany, Jeffersonville, small groups. They come up with a project that they're going to jointly work on, and they each take a piece of it, and they get it done. And our Fort Wayne group. So what are the grants for? They go for historical research, and as I'm sure you all know, step 1 is the research, the documentation. What is significant about this history, this site? We fund capital restoration projects, a new roof, a furnace, air conditioning system, painting, whatever that has to do with the actual site. Now, the real difference in the work that we do versus typical preservation work is we do not focus on high architecture sites, because most African American heritage sites are not high architecture. As you probably all know, most National Register listings focus on criteria C. We say that because of many factors, from demolition to gentrification, many of these buildings are no longer in existence, or not in existence as they were originally. So we focus on what happened between those walls. What is the history and the heritage? And then we try to make sure that that site stays intact. Markers, genealogy and research training, and then, as I said earlier, capacity building. We have a number of partners, and you'll see Ball State at the top of the list, and you're going to find out why in a minute. So partners do different things with us and for us, and we love them, we need them. For example, let's pick the Nature Conservancy, which is not too far from here. Their offices are are around the corner. The Nature Conservancy funded one of our interns last year, and that was a huge help. The Nature Conservancy is also paying for a documentary that we're working on now about a nature preserve in Owen County that was believed to have contained a cave that was used for escaping enslaved people. So we paid for the research, and now we're producing a documentary, and our conclusion is we don't know what that cave was used for. However, the property was owned by a black family connected to Daniel Boone. So I always have to say, not the famous Daniel Boone, but a relative of the famous Daniel Boone who lived in Owen County. So we've been able to document that information and produce that documentary. The Freetown Village is another partner. We have history classes the third Thursday of every month where we, educate the community about some important black history relevant to Indiana, and so forth. Each of these partners do different things with us to help support the program and the work we're doing. So I want to talk about Ball State partnerships, because I'm going to be recruiting more partners right here this day. Okay, we have a lot of them. Ball State has been a tremendous partner to the program since day one. Starting with this project that was led by Professor J.P. Hall. This project was a studio project in Madison, Indiana. In Madison, Indiana, there's a community called Georgetown. Georgetown is a historically black community dating back to the 1820s. It was an underground hotbed. It's right on the Ohio River, and we're told that back in that period, there were areas that you could just walk across the river from Kentucky into Indiana. So the mayor there in that community wants to do some restorative work in that community, but he wanted to lift up the German heritage and pretty much push to the side the black heritage. So we have worked with them to make that community understand it does not need to be either or, it's both and. This is the full story. And this is one of the things that we say all the time, that we want to tell the full story of our history and not leave out anything. Here's an example of the full story not being told, having nothing to do with race. How many here know Levi Colfin's wife's name? Levi Colfin was a very famous abolitionist. He was based on the east side of the state in Richmond. Very historic writings that he left. Nobody never knows Catherine's name. A few years ago, the Levi Colfin House incorporated her name into that house. So now it is the Catherine and Levi Colfin House. Because when you think about it, you think, okay, the Colfins helped enslaved people escape through Indiana into Canada. Who do you think did the cooking and the sewing and the nurturing? It was Catherine. So she is part of that full story. I'll go to the next project that we're working on with Ball State. Oh, by the way, with this studio project, it was a great project. They were able to come up with some themes for that community and how it could be restored and improved and what uses that might exist there. In that picture you see behind me here, that was a presentation to the city, including the mayor. He came, and so the mayor has taken a different position after this studio and the presentation, and he learned how tourism dollars could flow in to that community when that Black history and heritage is incorporated. Ball State student Ahmad Carroll, who is now almost a graduate. You graduate, Ahmad? Yeah, this year, that's right, this year. Okay, was our intern a year ago, and he documented the burials of African Americans at the Green Lawn Cemetery, which has been the center of a lot of public interest when a soccer stadium and bridge were proposed for that area. And so you'll see in this picture, this is a picture that our community advisory group doesn't like me using because it identifies the area as a colored burial ground. We think, so I want to emphasize, think that this was an area where African Americans were segregated in burials. This is an 1821 cemetery. It was the burial place for many of the city's pioneers. Think about, you know, when Indianapolis was formed, the state in 1816, Indianapolis, 1820, 21. So this was one of the first public cemeteries in the city. Thousands of people were buried there. It actually is a number of cemeteries, not just one, with that section here at the, it would be your bottom left, being the original site of the cemetery. So through mortality records, excuse me, Ahmad was able to extract the list of African Americans that we then began researching, and we have just found some outstanding information as a result of that research, including information about the founder of Bethel AME Church, which is the oldest black church in Indianapolis, the founder of Prince Hall Masonry here in Indiana, and so many others. The first black property owner, Cheney Lively, who was a servant to Alexander Ralston, who platted the city of Indianapolis. He's the one who came up with this, you know, circle and mile square platting. So Ahmad did that work, and he did a great job. Another project that we're working on is a driving tour. We are working with Professor John Philwalk to create augmented reality stops through his Institute for Digital Intermediate Arts, the DIA lab at Ball State. This is a handheld tour application with about 12 stops along Indiana Avenue, and we are going to introduce augmented reality stops within those 12 spots. So using your telephone, you'll be able to see Madam Walker walk up to you and tell you about her history, or, you know, any other important figure that we want to bring to life. We're also using this technology, and it's really amazing, where we bring photos to life. We activate these photos, we give them movement, and these will all be in this application, and Professor Philwalk is working on that right now. So that project is about 70% done. I had mentioned the cemetery, so I wanted to circle back to it again, and back to Ahmad, actually. One of the things that he's done is he's done some renderings for landscaping the cemetery. So that picture that is behind the inset is what had been proposed. We don't know if this project is going to take place. You'll see the Henry Street Bridge there that is now under construction through that cemetery. And by the way, there is a archaeologically led excavation being done now there at that site. And Jordan, I think it's 600, how many grave shafts? 700 in less than a 1 acre site. So how far are we complete? 33%. Yeah. We fought over the last few years to get what the city has agreed to do and is doing, which is to excavate that site the right way. So we're really happy about that. So now we've got to get the developer to do it if he's going to proceed with that Indy 11 soccer stadium project. Here is another Ball State project that we've worked with a professor on, Eva Zygmunt, which is Schaefer Chapel AME Church in Muncie. Schaefer Chapel is the church to which the 2 men lynched in Marion, Indiana back in the 1930s were taken after the lynching. There was no one that would take them in Marion after this horrific incident. So the pastor of Schaefer, who was an undertaker, agreed to drive to Marion and pick up these corpses and bring them back. under police escort. So this church has a lot of significance. This is believed to have been the last lynching here in Indiana. And, this history can be uncomfortable. So this is one of these pieces, snapshots of history that makes a lot of folks uncomfortable. But we are also doing work on the actual site itself. And that has been led by Professor Eva. And so we're going to be hanging in there to do as much as we can to help with this project, too. Here's another project that we're just starting that is involving Ball State folks. Professor Trotte is proposing that she help me with this project. This is going to be an interesting project. This is I'm told that this is yard art, but I don't know. This is a site in Gary, Indiana, at the home of Katie Hall. Katie Hall was the first Black Indiana Congresswoman. She is also the person who is responsible for us recognizing MLK Day as a national holiday. But, her profile has not been lifted up. Her history, her heritage, her impact is not well known today. And so we want to address that through helping them with this memorial plaza that they've created at her home site. And you'll see at the top of that photo her residence that they want to be a museum in Gary, Indiana. So we're going to be coming up with some landscape designs for that site that'll be low maintenance. Her husband's still alive. He's 90-something years old. She has a daughter alive. She's in her 70s. So we are trying to help them get structured so that there's an endowment there to maintain this land. It's about half an acre, 3/4 of an acre of land, where there has been placed a historical marker. But you can see that, they need some help. So we did award them a grant. And then Professor Trotte is proposing additional work and support for documenting Katie Hall's history and for helping us come up with some of the best designs for that site, as well as a mod. He's going to be going up there and coming back with some suggestions, too, for what we can do with that site for $10,000. It's not a lot of money. Somebody just told me that they just spent $1,000 this weekend on mulch. So I'm like, oh, my God. So we're going to figure it out, though. Another Ball State Connected project that we're doing is in Bloomington, Indiana, at the Banneker Center. The Banneker Center has a lot of community, civic, heritage significance there. We supported the cost of a building assessment last year, and just this few weeks ago, we approved a small grant to help with roof repair at that site. That site is still used by the city, the community, and it has a lot of heritage and history. Another Ball State student, Sierra Ivy, helped us with a survey of another significant community here in Indianapolis that has little known Black heritage. It is the Martindale area that is located roughly between 16th Street on the south, the Monon on the west, Keystone on the east, and 30th Street on the north. Within that area, there is a park, Douglas Park, which was the only park that African Americans could go to in Indianapolis for some generations. We are trying to get that area on the National Register as a historic district. We were directed by the DHPA office here to maybe focus on a thematic listing based on the churches. So Sierra did a survey of all the churches, and you'll see just in that area the number of churches there. But what we've decided on is that we would use part of that area as the designated part of a historic district. So we're starting work on that now. We'll need to do community engagement and a number of other things. So if anybody here from Ball State is interested in a project, we are wide open for help on that one. So we're also developing other projects in Muncie and Gary with Ball State. In Muncie, we're looking at doing a survey of historically significant Black sites And also in Gary, we're working on the same thing with Ball State folks. Now I want to show you some of the major projects that we're doing. Any of these you see that you want to help us with, please let me know. My number one huge major project that I've never tried to take on before in any form at this level is Gary Roosevelt High School. Gary Roosevelt High School is one of 3 high schools built back in the 1920s and 30s for African Americans. These schools were built during a time when schools were resegregated, because at one point Indiana schools became integrated, then they were resegregated. Gary Roosevelt is one of the schools, Crispus Attucks is the other, and Lincoln High School in Evansville is the third. Lincoln High School was demolished. Crispus Attucks is still going strong. In fact, it's about to undergo some multi-million-dollar work. And then Gary Roosevelt has been closed for 7 or 8 years. And it is sitting there rotting away. It's full of content, it's mired in politics. It is such an iconic place for the community. It has not been vandalized because the community is very protective of it. It's in the Midtown area of Gary, which in it of itself has had significant disinvestment. And so we are trying to get that energy rolling there by focusing on this school and that neighborhood where the Jackson 5 family lived, where Avery Brooks for Star Trekkies out here lived, and so many other important people in the pop culture world who came out of Gary and went on to great things. And so for the last few years, we have been arm wrestling this big monster down to the ground. We conducted a community engagement a few weeks ago. We're going to be issuing the report about what the community wants. We're going to be meeting with developers. We're going to try to put together a development team. And we're going to have to do this all under the very guarded thumb of the school corporation that owns the property and wants to maintain control but has no resources or capacity. So that's a big lift for us, but we're making progress. We're going to be getting the content out of there. It was like the day the earth stood still. School ended, everyone got up, walked away, and everything is still in the school. And so there's been some, rummaging through the building where, bookcases are knocked over, that kind of thing. But for the most part, the school has great bones, and it's in good shape. So we're looking for a reuse of that site. This we estimate to be at least a $25 million project. I mentioned the Martindale area to you already, so I won't belabor that. I want to talk to you about a few other sites that we've been working on that we could use help with. Lau Station is one of those 90 black settlements that I had mentioned to you earlier. It's in Gibson County, also in the southwest part of the state. It was a black community that was started in the 1840s. It was self-contained. It had a post office, groceries. It was an agricultural community. And on the right, or on the left, on your left, you'll see how that school that was there looked when we began working with Lau Station and where it is today. We have spent, much money and time with this project to get that site restored. It's now used as a learning center for youngsters down in that part of the state. They go there to learn about agricultural life and particularly about black heritage. So we are now trying to get them structured on the business side. They're a one-man band. This Stanley Madison runs it. He's in his 70s. He's still trying to be the director, the CEO, the board chair, the plumber, the gardener, on and on. So we're trying to help him with that. We have found that one of the biggest obstacles to doing this work is trust. Because of the trauma and the history of the violated trust, most of these communities are very guarded and they're very suspicious about your motives, and so trust. The other big issue is control. Who's going to be the boss? So we are very careful to make sure these communities understand that you're the boss, you're in control, we're here to partner with you and help you. So after, getting that, stated over and over again, and not just saying it, but showing it and doing it, we begin to open up some doors and some relationships so we can get this work done. Here's a church in Marion, Indiana, we need help with as well. This church was built for Quakers, the Friends congregation, back at the early part of the 20th century. And it was designed by a black architect, the first one licensed here in Indiana, Samuel Plato, and you all probably familiar with him, who designed this church. And it was occupied by the First Friends up until the 1990s, at which time the church was sold to a black congregation there in Marion. Now this congregation was small, didn't have any resources, deferred maintenance that was already deferred, and that church began to go down, 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 down. Finally, they moved out. A storm did some significant damage to the roof, and there was water infiltration. It was a mess. So when we found out about this church, it was when we learned that the local preservation organization was considering a receivership to take control of the property because it was just sitting there like a big mess. And so they contacted us and we weighed in on that. And I thought, no, you can't take that church away from the black congregation, no. And so we began working with them and with that congregation. So we have a new roof on it, as you see here in the picture. We need to determine what we're gonna do with that stained glass window site opening. $700,000 to get it replaced, so that's not gonna happen through landmarks money. Maybe the Lord will come and give us a window or something, I don't know, but it's not, that 700 grand is not gonna be wisely spent funds for that site. You can see the windows on the bottom, on the floor level that are not appropriate that the church had installed, so we're gonna do something with that. And we're currently getting this site on the National Register. But that is a project. We need to continue our grooming of that congregation, which is based in Toledo, Ohio, by the way. We're trying to get them to partner with a developer who will take controlling interest of the building and invest in that site. But pray for us here for this church site. We are working on this. We're also doing oral history projects all over the state. The Indiana State Library allowed us to set up a oral history collection. I know Ball State has a great black oral history collection, and I am hoping at some point to be able to have our collection be linked to that collection, because what we have found is that these oral histories are spread out everywhere. They're in libraries, they're in schools, but who knows where they are. So when we're doing this research, we have no index, no way of finding out or learning where these various collections are. So we're trying to make this collection a collection of collections, and that they all be public facing. So we have that collection site built. It's through the Indiana State Library, through the Indiana Memory website, and we are looking for funding to help get this done, because there's costs in the transcription, there's costs in the equipment to do the actual harvesting of the oral histories. We have one tomorrow now in Gibson County. Actually tomorrow we're working with the Vincennes and some other folks down that way. Well, here is a building we're working on in South Bend with our group there. We're looking to find an adaptive reuse for it. King and King Funeral Home, we tried to save it. It's on the east side. It was the oldest black funeral home on the east side of Indianapolis. We lost the fight to prevent it from being demolished, so that 1880s original structure was torn down. However, we were able to save thousands of death certificate records that were in a closet, stowed away in boxes, stacked up to the ceiling. And so last summer we got that all out, turned it over to the Historical Society. And so there is a huge indexing and digitization project waiting to happen for that site. We do all kinds of events. These are educational events, and one of them that is coming up actually June 19th, I hope you can attend, is our Juneteenth celebration. We're going to be honoring our retired CEO Marsh Davis and attorney Faye Williams, who we call the mother of Indiana's Juneteenth celebration. And we'll have a speaker and a panel. We're going to be talking about Black resilience. How do we weather these times that we're all going through right now, politically, socially, emotionally? And we'll hone in on spiritual resilience, mental resilience, and financial resilience. So with that, I'm going to end right here, and I'd like to talk to you all. You all talk back if we got time. Ms. Dorna, do we have time? Okay. So, you know, I'm an open book. I like to answer questions. I'm straightforward, shoot from the hip, direct. And so I'd just like to hear from you now about any questions you have about the program, about the Black heritage, or whatever you want to ask about. Yes.
So earlier this week, somebody had a question about the intern experience at Indiana. I'm sorry. If I'm not mistaken, earlier this week we got a question about what the intern experience is like in the Black Heritage Preservation Program. So we'd like to speak to that.
About the
Yeah, like the
experiences?
experience, like what do you do as interns, and like what is the natural procedure that you have in terms of learning this type of information and integrate it into the
Okay, I'll go back to my The question was, what were the experiences that interns go through, and what is the process? You know, my position as a mentor is to give them every experience possible. We go everywhere, we do everything. So anything I'm doing, I'm going to expect them to do too, actually. So that means we're in caves, we're in graveyards, we're in raggedy houses with floors about to collapse. You know, we are anywhere we need to be to uncover, to document, to review a Black heritage site. And then, you know, the research and the documentation. I'll tell you something that was really interesting that happened last year with one of our interns, too. I learned after the intern came on board that intern could not read or write cursive. And they're a college student. Now, think about that. Research, you know, all the documentation typically is in cursive. So our plan was that intern was going to learn how to read cursive by trying. So we were able to get that intern up to speed on cursive every day. There was a cursive writing drill. It was every day I needed a paragraph when I walked in, you know. And so, you know, it depends on what each individual needs. I think for Ahmad was a great intern. I think his only need was speak up and network, and he's been doing a great job too. Ahmad was able to intern the following year at one of our partners, V3 Architects, and he has another internship this year. We love Ahmad, so he came back as a scholarship recipient as well. And Ms. Ghana Weiss, who was also an intern, she's a journalism major, is now a reporter at Mirror Indy. So she's out there doing her work, and she was a good asset in the writing side of the business. So she was like the mean teacher to make sure all the writing was right throughout the summer. And so, you know, we give these interns the experiences that we feel they need to become stronger professionals. So whatever it is, if it's a matter of understanding how to be respectful and courteous. For example, I had an intern who was doing an oral history interview, and he called this woman by her first name. And she was 80 years old. Now, in the Black experience, that is a sign of total disrespect. You don't call an 80-year-old woman in my opinion, anytime by her first name, unless she says, don't call me Ms. Jones, call me Helen, if that's what she wants, okay. But we had, so we teach them whatever they need to be taught. And so that's, we kind of mother them a bit, but keep them, out there enough to know that you fly away, little birdie, and do great things, So, yeah, we do. We've had now, this is the 3rd year, and we've had, with this group, 11, so 4, 3, 7, 11 interns. So hopefully we'll have dozens and dozens more, and we'll have these little birdies flying all over the country doing great things. Yes?
As a student, you spoke about telling the whole narrative and incorporating heritage and trying to tell the whole story. Are there any intuitions or guides that working professionals or students can take cues from the site to understand where to start and how to tell those stories and find the stories?
Yeah, it's hard to know what you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. It's hard to, and that's hard. But do know that, as I had mentioned earlier, as it relates to African American heritage, African Americans have deep roots in Indiana. So I don't know of any stories that would not have included a presence of African Americans. It's a matter of finding out what that presence is and what it looked like and how it resonated historically. And the best way is to talk to people who are from that community. For example, that Bluff Road community that was being talked about during the presentation before mine, I didn't know that community was there. That was an African American community until someone called me. And it was the historian from Wayne Township who called me and told me about that community. Here's something you all might not know. Here's another example, because you don't know what you don't know. Eagle Creek, you all know about Eagle Creek. Eagle Creek was a black settlement. Now, the only evidence of that being a black settlement is this big rock with a plaque on it out there by the Peace Learning Center at Eagle Creek that says this was the location of the first Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, which is a black church. So, there's institutional evidence that had a black population. And then that property ended up in the hands of the Lilly family, who then turned it over later to the Parks Department. But it was a black community. Now, further north over there in that area, there has been a property grab. And just last year, I got a call from a woman who's a journalist in Chicago, whose family owned a house there that was being tagged for code violations. And I didn't know that was a black community that went that far north over in that area. So you just have to dig and find out, because you don't know what you don't know until you know it. So you talk to people, and you do some research. And the thing is, people say, oh, it's hard to find out about black history, we don't, but it is not. It's there. It has been shepherded and maintained, not necessarily through the traditional ways that history gets maintained, but for people, but it is there. It's there through property records, it's there through notes of organizational meetings, and it's there. Yes?
Thank you. You may or may not know there are a few Canadians in the audience who are really happy to be here and really happy to hear these stories. I just want to give a bit of background. About 20 years ago in Canada, the Historic Sites and Monuments Board recommended to the minister responsible the designation as a National Historic Site of Buxton Settlement, which is just between Chatham, Ontario, and Lake Ontario. It's roughly 9,000 acres. More often, I worked in heritage conservation with the federal government, did a study of that, why it was important, what were the elements that characterized it, et cetera, et cetera. And when you talk about important people, there's a woman named Shannon Prince who has been continually involved with that in terms of promoting and ensuring that those stories aren't lost along the way. And I guess my question would be, are you familiar with that, and do you have a link with that? Because I'm sure the common experiences that, are so important to share. You're talking about your network, and that's sort of the underground railroad story that we find in Canada and as a nation problem. So.
There is definitely a link. I am familiar with Buxton and Chatham, and in fact did a tour with a historian here some years ago, but also have some personal connection. One of my great-grandparents went to Chatham after he got into some trouble down in southern Indiana. So I'm familiar with Chatham. There are links between Chatham, Buxton, and Indiana. There was, I'm not sure what exactly it was, whether it was through the churches that were in, because there were AME churches there too. And so the AMEs, the African Methodist Episcopal Church denomination, had a national network of churches, but it was also extended into Canada, in Buxton and in Chatham. So yes, I don't think we've really studied that connection enough, that pathway, that route between this state and Canada, but there definitely was a connection there. And I don't know anyone who's really done very much work in showing that connection. I have anecdotal information as I've done research, so definitely there's a connection.
Can I just add that Shannon Prince was then also just nominated and is now a member of the Order of Canada.
Really?
Which is
Yes. That's great. That's great. Canada's doing the right thing there. That's good. Thank you for letting me know that. Thank you. Yes.
Lecture. I'm really inspired by the model of capacity building, and I'm sure it's very case by case basis, like how you define that would be for any community, and it also would change over time for any community. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you would define that, like whether there is a model that you are starting from and letting it take on its own life, or if there is just totally a flexible depending on the situation.
Well, yeah, it does. It so depends on the situation. We are working, this summer I'm going to put together a toolkit for communities. And I've really struggled with that because every community is so different in terms of the resources that would come to the table for this. What I am finding, though, is that the most passion and interest comes when there's a personal connection. For example, Lost Creek. Dee Reed, who was on our advisory council, has deep roots in Lost Creek. So as I look for someone to do the work there and to lead the work there, she became a person who kind of rose to the top because she wanted to do her own family documentation and her own research. And she had retired from Rose-Hulman, so she had the time. That's a factor right there, the time, the passion. And then having a variety of resources in the core group. So in other words, you need somebody who's going to get out meeting notices. Who's going to do that? You need someone who is going to be a nurturer and who's going to, bring people in and keep them together. Because it's easy for these groups to fall apart. When the leader particularly is disconnected and is not doing what he or she should be doing, the group falls apart. So to directly answer your question, it's been a city by city kind of a thing. It's different things in different cities. For example, Gary's group was one of the first groups. We had a great first meeting. We went there, yay, we're going to do this. We're going to save all these places. We're going to do all this. And they would meet once a month, and they would talk about all their history. They would meet the next month, talk about their history. They'd meet the next month. And you gotta do something. So how do you get them to actually do something? So you can suggest, you can say, oh, why don't you have a speaker? Why don't you have oral history collection? Why don't you save that park site over there with that building there that's historic? Well, you can make suggestions. But again, it is so, if you know of a secret formula or way to get these groups, well, let me know, please, because it's city by city, community by community. It is definitely, but you know what? Once they do something that gets publicity and that there's an excitement that takes on this group, and they want to do more. So if we can get one project done successfully, then we pretty much have them then. But getting that one, so it's interesting though doing this work with them. But yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Guys, we're gonna go for more round of applause.
Well, thank you everybody. Thank you.